Lena sat on the edge of her small bed, counting the few coins in her hand. The light in her room flickered as if even the bulb was tired of working. She sighed softly and placed the coins on the table. 1, 2, 3, $4 in total. That was all she had. But tonight was special, and she wanted to look her best. It was the first time someone had ever asked her out on a date. She opened the small wooden box her mother had given her years ago and took out a single hairpin, silver but slightly rusted. Her mother had told her once, "You don't need gold to look beautiful, my girl. A kind heart shines brighter." Those words stayed in Lena's heart like a promise. She brushed her hair carefully and tied it neatly. Her dress wasn't new. In fact, it was the same one she wore to church last year. She had washed it the night before and ironed it with care so that it looked almost fresh. In the tiny mirror hanging on the wall, Lena smiled at her reflection. She looked simple, but her eyes had a spark of hope. "It's just a coffee," she whispered to herself. "I can afford that." Her voice trembled slightly, but she pushed the worry away. She didn't want to think about money tonight. She wanted to feel like a normal girl, not a maid's daughter, not someone who counted every coin before spending it. Her mother had already left for work early that morning. She cleaned the mansion of a rich family in the city, people who wore designer clothes and never worried about bills or rent. Sometimes, Lena wondered what it would feel like to live like them, but she never complained. Her mother worked hard so she could finish school, and Lena helped by doing small jobs, washing dishes, babysitting, and sometimes cleaning neighbors' homes. Every dollar she earned, she saved carefully. But today, she allowed herself one small wish, a coffee date. When she stepped out into the street, the evening breeze brushed her face. She held her small purse tightly, feeling both excited and nervous. The cafe wasn't far, just a 15-minute walk from their home. She had passed by it many times, always watching people laughing, sipping coffee, taking pictures, and enjoying themselves. Tonight, for once, she would be one of them. As she entered the cafe, the warm smell of coffee and vanilla filled the air. The soft music made her heart beat faster. She looked around. Couples were sitting close, whispering to each other, smiling and laughing. She felt a little shy as she found an empty corner table and sat down. A waiter came over with a polite smile. "Good evening, miss. What can I get you?" Lena quickly opened her wallet and saw the $4 again. She smiled gently and said, "Just one coffee, please. I'm waiting for someone." The waiter nodded and left. She could feel people glancing at her. Her old dress didn't quite fit in with the shiny shoes and expensive bags around her, but she didn't care. Her heart was too full of hope to notice. While she waited, she kept checking the door every few minutes. Her hands played nervously with the edge of her napkin. She imagined how it would go. Maybe he'd bring flowers, maybe they'd laugh over coffee, maybe he'd tell her she looked nice. Her heart fluttered at the thought. At a nearby table sat a young man in a neat black suit. He looked calm, confident, and completely out of her world. He was Ethan, though Lena didn't know that name yet. He was the son of the billionaire who owned several hotels in the city. He had come to the cafe alone, trying to escape his usual world of fancy parties and fake smiles. When he saw Lena walk in, something about her caught his attention. She wasn't like the people he usually saw. There was a quiet innocence about her, a soft glow in her eyes that spoke of simple dreams. He noticed how she carefully placed her small purse on the table and smiled at every waiter who passed by. When her coffee arrived, she thanked the waiter politely and sipped slowly, trying to make it last. Ethan didn't mean to stare, but something in her made him curious. Who was she waiting for? Why did she look both happy and sad at the same time? Minutes passed. The clock ticked softly. Every time the cafe door opened, Lena's eyes lifted in hope, but no one came for her. Ethan could see her expression slowly change from excitement to quiet disappointment. Still, she didn't frown, didn't cry. She just kept smiling, as if trying to convince herself everything was fine. After an hour, she looked down at her coffee cup, now empty and cold. She reached into her purse and pulled out the $4, placing them neatly on the bill tray. The waiter hesitated, knowing it wasn't enough for the coffee and tax, But Lena's gentle thank you made him nod without a word. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and whispered softly, "Maybe next time." Ethan watched her as she walked toward the door, her shoulders straight, her dignity intact, even though her heart was clearly breaking. In that moment, something inside him stirred. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew one thing. She wasn't like anyone else he had ever met. As she disappeared into the cool night, Ethan couldn't shake the image of her calm, brave smile. He didn't know it then, but that single evening, that girl with $4 and a heart full of hope was about to change his life forever. The evening lights of the cafe shimmered through the big glass windows, making the place look warm and lively. People were chatting, laughing, and sipping their drinks. For Lena, it felt like stepping into another world. A world full of comfort and confidence, far away from the small, quiet life she was used to. She took a deep breath and looked around, trying not to feel out of place. Her old but clean dress and simple shoes made her look different from the others, but her kind smile made her glow in her own way. At the far end of the cafe sat Ethan, a young man dressed in a black suit. His watch probably cost more than Lena's family earned in a year, but he looked tired of his world. He wasn't like the noisy crowd around him. He sat alone, reading something on his phone, but when Lena entered, his attention slowly drifted toward her. She didn't shine like the rich girls he often saw. There were no diamonds, no perfume, no designer bags. Yet something about her felt pure and peaceful. Lena sat at a small table near the window. Her hands trembled slightly as she fixed her hair and looked at the menu. The waiter came over with a smile. "Good evening, miss. What would you like to have?" She looked at the long list of items: lattes, fraps, desserts, each one more expensive than the last. Her throat went dry. For a moment, she thought about leaving. But then she remembered why she was here. She had promised herself she wouldn't let her situation embarrass her. Taking a small breath, she smiled at the waiter and said softly, "Just 1 cup of coffee, please. I'm waiting for someone." The waiter nodded and walked away, but Ethan heard her gentle voice. "Waiting for someone." The words stayed with him. He looked up and saw her glance at the door every few seconds, hope shining in her eyes. Something inside him told him she wasn't waiting for fun. She was waiting with her heart. As Lena waited, she kept her phone on the table, checking it again and again. Her date had promised to meet her at 7. It was now almost past, but she still smiled. Maybe he was stuck in traffic, she thought. Maybe he was just late. She looked outside, where the city lights flickered and cars rushed by. In her small world, this cafe visit was a big dream, her first real date. She had imagined laughter, soft music, maybe even a walk afterward. But for now, all she had was an empty chair and her own nervous heartbeat. When the waiter brought her coffee, she thanked him kindly and took a careful sip. The cup was warm, and for a second, she closed her eyes, enjoying the rich smell. "It's perfect," she whispered to herself. But the sweetness faded when she opened her eyes and saw the empty chair again. Ethan couldn't look away. He saw the way she smiled politely, even though she was clearly nervous. He saw her straighten her back every time someone entered the cafe, only to drop her gaze when she realized it wasn't the person she was waiting for. He noticed her hands, clean but rough, showing signs of hard work. She wasn't someone born into comfort. She had earned every little thing she had. A group of college girls nearby were laughing loudly, showing off their phones and fancy clothes. One of them whispered something and glanced at Lena, giggling behind her hand. Ethan frowned. He didn't know why, but he felt a strange protectiveness toward the girl with the gentle eyes and quiet dignity. She didn't notice the stares, or maybe she pretended not to. She simply looked down, stirred her coffee, and smiled again, as if trying to stay strong. Minutes turned into nearly an hour. The cafe grew busier, and yet Lena's table remained the same. One girl, one untouched cup of coffee, and a hope that was slowly fading. Ethan's heart ached as he watched her check her phone again. Still no message. No call. At one point, she took a deep breath and looked at the door with a brave face, whispering to herself, "Maybe something happened. Maybe he'll come soon." Her voice was soft, almost breaking. Ethan heard it faintly and felt something stir inside him. Not pity, but admiration. He had seen countless people fake smiles in his world, but hers was real, even when she was clearly hurting. The waiter came by again and asked carefully, "Would you like to order anything else, miss?" Lena shook her head politely. "No, thank you. Just the coffee." Her tone was gentle, respectful. She didn't want to seem poor, even though the $4 in her purse was all she had. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Who was she waiting for? Why wasn't he here? He wanted to get up and say something, maybe offer her another drink or ask if she was okay. But he stopped himself. She didn't look like someone who needed saving. She looked like someone who had learned to fight her battles quietly. Outside, the sun had set completely, and soft music filled the cafe. Lena finished her coffee, now cold, and checked her phone one last time. No message. No call. A small sigh escaped her lips. Still, she stood up gracefully, opened her purse, and carefully took out her $4. She placed them on the table and smiled faintly at the waiter as she whispered, "Thank you." As she walked toward the door, her reflection passed through the glass, small, simple, but strong. Ethan's eyes followed her until she disappeared into the night. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she had only $4, but one thing was clear. The quiet girl who came for a coffee and waited with hope had touched something deep inside him. In a world where people bought happiness, she carried dignity with empty pockets. And though she didn't know it yet, that single evening, that single cup of coffee, had already changed the course of her life. Lena kept staring at the door, her heart beating faster every time someone walked in. Each time, she hoped it would be him. The man who had promised to meet her for coffee. The one who had said, "I'll be there, I promise." But as the minutes passed, her excitement began to fade, replaced by quiet worry. Maybe he was running late. Maybe he got stuck in traffic. Maybe he forgot. She tried to stay positive, but the little clock on the wall kept ticking, reminding her how long she had been waiting. Around her, the cafe was alive with laughter and soft music. Couples shared desserts, friends took selfies, and the smell of fresh pastries filled the air. But at Lena's table, there was only silence. Her half-finished coffee had gone cold. She kept touching her phone, checking the screen again and again, hoping for a message that never came. Each time the screen stayed empty, her heart sank a little deeper. At another table, Ethan watched quietly. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. Something about the way she sat, trying to smile even when her eyes looked sad, made him curious. He could tell she wasn't from this world of expensive perfumes and loud laughter. Her dress was simple, her hands rough from work, but she had a kind of grace that was rare. The waiter came to Lena's table and asked softly, "Ma'am, would you like to order something else?" She smiled politely and shook her head. "No, thank you. I'm still waiting for someone." Her voice trembled slightly, but she kept her smile. The waiter nodded and walked away, his face showing quiet sympathy. He could tell she had been waiting too long. Time passed, 10 minutes, 20, then an hour. The crowd in the cafe began to change. New people came in, others left. But Lena stayed, her eyes fixed on the door, her hopes slowly fading. At one point, she tried to convince herself, maybe he had an emergency. Maybe he'll come tomorrow. She didn't want to think the worst. She didn't want to believe she had been forgotten. Ethan's heart grew heavy watching her. He imagined how she must be feeling. Sitting alone, pretending to be okay, hiding her disappointment from the world. He could see her trying to act calm, but every now and then, she would bite her lip or look down at her lap, lost in thought. She reminded him of someone who had faced too many disappointments but still refused to give up. Finally, Lena looked at the time and sighed. It had been nearly 2 hours. The coffee was cold now, untouched for the last half hour. She picked up her phone one last time and sent a short message. "I waited. I hope you're okay." She stared at the screen for a moment, waiting for the 3 dots, the sign that he was typing, but they never appeared. Her throat tightened. Still, she smiled to herself, whispering, "It's okay. Maybe next time. She reached into her small purse and pulled out her money. For crumpled dollars. She placed them carefully on the bill tray. The waiter noticed and said quietly, "Ma'am, it's okay. I can." But before he could finish, she interrupted him with a gentle smile. "No, please. It's fine. Thank you for your kindness." Ethan watched all of this unfold. He could afford to buy the entire cafe if he wanted to, but at that moment he felt strangely powerless. He wanted to walk over and say something, maybe tell her she deserved better, maybe offer her another coffee. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the quiet dignity in her eyes. Even in sadness, she didn't look weak. She looked strong. As Lena stood up to leave, she took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and smiled at the waiter one last time. She didn't want anyone to feel sorry for her. She wanted to walk out like a girl who had simply enjoyed her evening, not one who had been stood up. But inside, her heart felt heavy. She had hoped for something different that night. Not fancy gifts or rich words. Just a moment where she could feel seen, appreciated, maybe even loved. Instead, she walked out with a small ache in her chest and a silent wish that someday, someone would truly show up for her. Ethan sat still, his eyes following her as she walked out into the cool night air. He could see her reflection in the glass door, her simple dress fluttering slightly in the wind, her head held high even though she had tears in her eyes. She didn't cry openly, but Ethan could tell she was holding everything inside. For a long moment he just sat there, lost in thought. He had seen many girls in expensive gowns and jewelry, laughing without care, but none of them had touched him like this girl did. She had something rare, honesty, the kind that couldn't be bought. The waiter came to clear her table and noticed the $4 she had left. He shook his head slightly, murmuring, "She didn't even order dessert." Ethan's eyes fell on the coins, and a thought came to him, simple but powerful. He reached into his pocket, took out some money, and handed it to the waiter. "Add a slice of chocolate cake," he said, "and bring her this note." He quickly scribbled a few words on a napkin. "You deserve someone who shows up. From the guy at the next table." The waiter nodded and hurried out to give it to her. Outside, Lena was just about to cross the street when the waiter called her name softly, handing her the note and the box. She looked at him in surprise. Who sent this?" she asked. The waiter smiled and pointed back toward the cafe, but when she turned around, the table was empty. Ethan was gone. Lena opened the note and read the words. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of warmth. She held the small box close to her chest and smiled for real this time. For the first time that evening, she didn't feel invisible. Someone had noticed. Someone had cared. And as she walked home under the streetlights, the chocolate cake in her hands and the note tucked safely in her purse, she whispered to herself, maybe kindness still exists. That night, while Ethan drove home through the quiet streets, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He didn't know her name, but he knew this. He wanted to see her again. Lena stood outside the cafe, her eyes still searching the street as if her date might appear at any moment. The city lights reflected in her eyes, making them look glossy, but deep inside, she was holding back tears. She didn't want to cry in public. Not here, not now. She told herself that maybe he had a reason, maybe something important had come up. She tried to believe it wasn't about her, that she wasn't the kind of girl people forgot. As she turned to leave, the waiter hurried out behind her, calling softly, "Excuse me, miss." Lena stopped, surprised. The waiter smiled kindly and handed her a small white box and a folded napkin. "Someone inside asked me to give this to you," he said. She blinked, confused. "Someone?" she repeated, looking through the cafe window. But when she glanced back inside, the corner table where the young man in the black suit had been sitting was empty. The waiter just nodded and said, "He paid for your coffee and left this for you." Lena hesitated for a moment, her fingers trembling as she opened the napkin. On it, written in neat, careful handwriting, were the words, "You deserve someone who shows up. From the guy at the next table." Her eyes widened as she read it again, her heart skipping a beat. She looked up, scanning the street, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious stranger, but he was gone. She held the note close to her chest, feeling something warm spread through her. For the first time that evening, someone had seen her, not as a poor girl, not as a maid's daughter, but as a person who mattered. She slowly opened the box. Inside was a small slice of chocolate cake. Rich, soft, and perfect. It wasn't just a dessert. It was kindness, wrapped in sugar and care. For a girl who had saved every coin just to buy one cup of coffee, that small slice felt like the most beautiful gift in the world. Lena sat on a nearby bench outside the cafe, holding the note and the cake. The night breeze brushed against her face as she took a small bite. It was sweet, but what truly made her smile was the thought behind it. A stranger, someone who owed her nothing, had cared enough to make her evening a little better. Inside the cafe, moments earlier, Ethan had been watching her from afar. When he saw the waiter hand her the note, he had quietly slipped out through the side door. He didn't want her to feel embarrassed or to think it was pity. That wasn't his reason at all. He just couldn't stand watching her leave with such sadness in her eyes. Something about her touched a place in his heart he didn't know existed. A quiet part that longed for honesty in a world full of show. As he walked to his car, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her face. The way she smiled through disappointment, the strength in her eyes, the way she carried her dignity like a crown even though her shoes were worn and her dress was old. He didn't even know her name, but she had left a deep mark on his mind. Meanwhile, Lena sat quietly, rereading the short message. She whispered it under her breath. "You deserve someone who shows up." No one had ever said something like that to her before. Her whole life, she had learned to expect less, to settle for what was available, to accept broken promises. But now, with those words written by a stranger, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She thought about the man at the next table. He had looked calm, serious, maybe a little lonely too. She remembered seeing him glance her way once or twice, but she never imagined he was paying attention. Why would someone like him, dressed in a suit, clearly from a rich world, notice someone like her? Yet he did, and not with judgment or mockery, but with kindness. She tucked the napkin carefully into her purse as if it were something precious. That little piece of paper, with its simple sentence, meant more to her than expensive gifts ever could. It reminded her that there were still good people in the world. People who noticed, people who cared quietly without expecting anything back. When she finally stood up to leave, she felt lighter. Her steps were still slow, but her heart was no longer heavy. As she walked through the streets, passing glowing shop windows and laughing couples, she smiled softly to herself. The date had failed, but the night hadn't been wasted. In a strange way, she had found something more meaningful: kindness from an unexpected place. At home, her mother was still at work. The small apartment was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. Lena sat on her bed and placed the cake box beside her. She unfolded the napkin again and read the words once more before whispering, "Thank you, whoever you are." Then she put the note safely inside her old wooden box, the same one that held her mother's hairpin and a few childhood memories. Somewhere across town, Ethan sat by his window, staring out at the city lights. He couldn't stop thinking about her. For the first time in a long time, he felt something real. Not the shallow satisfaction of luxury or success, but the simple peace that came from doing something good. He wondered who she was. What was her story? What made her eyes so gentle yet so strong? He didn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness, a slice of cake and a handwritten note, had tied their lives together in a way neither of them could have imagined. That night, as Lena drifted off to sleep, she smiled softly. She didn't feel like the poor maid's daughter anymore. She felt seen, valued, and respected. Even if it was just by a stranger she might never meet again. But fate had other plans. That stranger, the kind man from the next table, would soon cross her path again. And when he did, her world would change forever, in ways she couldn't yet dream of. The next morning, the sun peeked through the thin curtains of Lena's small room. The sound of birds outside mixed with the faint noise of traffic in the distance. Lena slowly opened her eyes and smiled softly as she remembered the night before. The disappointment of being stood up still stung a little, but the warmth of that note and the sweet taste of the chocolate cake lingered in her heart. She reached for her small wooden box, opened it carefully, and looked at the napkin once more. "You deserve someone who shows up," she whispered, tracing the words with her finger. It still felt like a dream, that someone had noticed her, that a stranger had cared enough to make her smile. She didn't know who he was or why he had done it, but she silently thanked him again. Then she folded the napkin neatly and placed it back into the box like a secret treasure. Her mother's voice came from the kitchen, cheerful as always. "Lena, wake up properly. I made breakfast." Lena got up quickly and joined her mother, who was packing her things for work. Her mother worked as a maid for a wealthy family in the city, the Johnsons. She had been working for them for almost 10 years. Despite the long hours and hard work, she was always kind and full of energy. "Guess what?" her mother said with a smile as she buttered a piece of toast. "Mr. Johnson's son came back from abroad yesterday. He's going to stay here for a few months. They say he's very smart and handsome. Studied business in London." Lena smiled politely, not paying much attention. Rich people and their lives always sounded like stories from another planet. "That's nice, Mama," she said softly. "Maybe that means you'll have fewer chores, since there's another family member to help." Her mother laughed, shaking her head. "Oh no, it means more work, but it's okay. They're good people." Lena didn't think much of it. After breakfast, she helped her mother pack lunch and then went out to do some errands. She spent the rest of the morning helping a neighbor with her kids and buying groceries from the market. She was just an ordinary girl living an ordinary day, until her mother came home later that evening, smiling like she had good news to share. "Lena, you won't believe it," her mother said excitedly, taking off her apron. "Remember I told you about Mr. Johnson's son who came back? His name is Ethan. He came to the kitchen today and talked to me. Such a polite young man. Not proud at all." Lena froze when she heard the name. "Ethan?" she repeated quietly, her heart skipping a beat. Her mind suddenly flashed back to the cafe, to the kind stranger in the black suit, the one who had paid for her coffee and left that note. Could it be the same person? No, she told herself quickly. Couldn't be. The city was full of people. Ethan was a common name. And what were the chances that a billionaire's son would sit in the same cafe as her, let alone notice her? Still, she felt her pulse quicken. "What did he look like?" she asked carefully, pretending to be casual. Her mother smiled. "Tall, dark hair, very polite. He was wearing a gray shirt today, no suit. He asked me about my family. Can you imagine that? He wanted to know if my daughter studies, what she wants to do in life. He said it's nice to meet hardworking people." Lena's heart sank and fluttered at the same time. That description, it matched. She could almost see him again, sitting at that cafe, quiet and thoughtful, watching her with kind eyes. Could it really be him? Her mother continued talking happily. "He told me he just came back from London. He'll be working with his father for a while before taking over the business. Such a decent young man. Not like the spoiled ones you see on TV." Lena forced a smile, her mind spinning. If it was truly the same Ethan, then fate had played a strange game. He had seen her at her most vulnerable, alone, embarrassed, trying to hide her pain, and now, without her knowing, he was connected to her life again through her mother's job. That night, as Lena lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about it. What if it was him? Should she say something? But then she shook her head. No, that would be silly. Even if it were the same Ethan, why would someone like him remember her? To him, she was probably just a stranger. A small moment in his big, important life. Still, a small part of her heart refused to let go of the thought. She remembered his note, the kindness in it, and how it had made her feel seen for the first time. Maybe, just maybe, some people were meant to cross your path more than once. The next day, her mother asked Lena to come along to help at the mansion for a few hours. They needed an extra hand to clean the guest area, and Lena agreed. When she stepped into the big house, her eyes widened. It was beautiful. Tall ceilings, shining floors, and walls covered in paintings that probably cost more than their entire apartment. She followed her mother quietly through the hallways until they reached the main sitting area. And there, standing near the window, was Ethan. The same face, the same calm eyes. He was talking to his father but turned slightly as they entered. His eyes met Lena's for just a moment. A soft, almost surprised look passed across his face. Lena's heart raced. She tried to look away quickly, pretending she was just another helper. But deep inside, she knew he had recognized her. The silence that passed between them was brief but powerful. The kind of silence that said more than words ever could. Her mother introduced her, smiling proudly. "This is my daughter, Lena. She's helping me today." Ethan smiled politely. "It's nice to meet you, Lena," he said in the same gentle voice she remembered from that night. Lena's throat tightened, but she managed to smile back. "Nice to meet you too, sir." In that moment, she realized the truth. It was him. The kind stranger from the café, the man who had written that note. Fate had brought him back into her life, not by chance, but for a reason she couldn't yet understand. Days turned into weeks, and Lena found herself helping her mother at the Johnson mansion more often. Every time she went, she tried her best to stay quiet and focused on her work. She cleaned, arranged flowers, and served tea without drawing attention to herself. But no matter how much she tried to stay invisible, she could always feel Ethan's eyes on her. Not in a rude or uncomfortable way, but in a way that made her heart race. He was always polite, always calm. Yet there was something in his gaze that made her feel like he saw her differently from everyone else. Ethan, too, couldn't ignore the feeling growing inside him. Every time Lena entered the room, he noticed her gentle nature. The way she helped her mother without complaint. The way she spoke kindly to everyone, even the guards and gardeners. She never seemed to seek attention, yet she carried a quiet strength that he found rare. He remembered that night at the cafe clearly, the girl sitting alone with only a few dollars, pretending to be fine while her eyes told a different story. Seeing her now, realizing she was his maid's daughter, shocked him at first. But instead of feeling awkward, he felt something stronger. Admiration. One afternoon, Ethan's mother, Mrs. Johnson, called for tea in the garden. Lena and her mother brought the tray outside, carefully setting everything on the glass table. The air was fresh, the flowers in full bloom. Ethan sat with his parents, listening quietly as they discussed a charity event. His mother noticed Lena and smiled kindly. "Maria," she said to Lena's mother, "your daughter is very helpful. You've raised her well." Lena blushed and looked down, murmuring a polite thank you. Ethan noticed how modest she was, how she didn't know how special she looked under the sunlight. He wanted to talk to her, but he also knew his parents might not approve of such familiarity. Still, when his mother went inside to take a phone call, he found the courage to speak. "Lena," he said softly. She turned, surprised to hear him use her name. "Yes, sir?" she replied quickly. "You don't have to call me sir," he said with a smile. "Just Ethan." Her eyes widened a little. "But, you're my mother's boss's son," she said quietly. Ethan chuckled. "And you're my mother's best helper's daughter. That makes us almost friends, doesn't it?" She didn't know how to respond. No one from his world had ever spoken to her like that, as if she was an equal. She could feel her cheeks warm, but she smiled shyly. "I guess so," she whispered. From that day on, small moments began to build between them. When Lena helped set the dining table, Ethan would offer to carry the heavier dishes. When she cleaned the study, he would ask her opinion about the books he was reading. Sometimes, when no one was around, they'd share short conversations. Simple things about dreams, music, and life. One day, while arranging flowers in the living room, Lena accidentally dropped a glass vase. It shattered on the marble floor, and she gasped in panic. Her mother rushed in, worried, but before she could apologize, Ethan stepped forward. "It's okay," he said firmly. "It was an accident." Mrs. Johnson walked in just in time to see the mess. "What happened here?" she asked sharply. Lena's mother started explaining nervously, but Ethan interrupted gently. "It was my fault, Mother. I bumped into the table," he said without hesitation. Lena looked at him in shock. He was lying to protect her. Mrs. Johnson frowned but didn't question him further. She sighed. "Please be careful next time." After she left, Lena whispered, "Why did you do that? It wasn't your fault." Ethan looked at her, his expression calm. "Because I didn't want you or your mother to get in trouble. Sometimes, people like my parents don't realize how hard others work." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to do that." He smiled faintly. "I wanted to." That small act of kindness made her heart ache in the best way. She realized then that Ethan wasn't like other rich people. He didn't treat her as someone beneath him. He treated her as someone who mattered. But Lena also knew her place. She couldn't afford to dream too big. That night, as she walked home beside her mother, the city lights shining in the distance, she kept replaying his words in her mind. "You don't have to call me sir." Sounded simple, but to her it meant a lot. It meant he saw her as a person, not just the maid's daughter. On the other side, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her either. When he sat in his office later that evening, going through work files, he found himself distracted by thoughts of her. Her kindness, her smile, the way she worked hard without complaint. He had met many women in his life, but none who carried such quiet grace. He wanted to know more about her, to help her somehow, but he also knew how fragile the line between their worlds was. As days passed, he started finding excuses to be around when Lena was there. He asked her about her studies, her dreams, and she shyly told him she wanted to finish school and maybe become a teacher someday. Ethan smiled. "You'd make a great teacher," he said sincerely. "You're patient and kind. The world needs people like that." Lena laughed softly. "People like me don't always get that far." Ethan looked at her seriously. "Then maybe someone should help change that." She looked into his eyes for a second too long, then looked away, her heart pounding. She didn't know what he meant, but something in his tone made her believe he wasn't just saying words. He meant them. Neither of them realized it yet, but something had already started to bloom quietly between them. A bond stronger than they expected, and one that would soon test both of their worlds. It was a rainy afternoon when everything began to change between Ethan and Lena. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, and the sound of thunder echoed in the distance. The Johnson mansion, usually filled with light and laughter, felt quieter that day. Ethan sat near the window, watching the raindrops race down the glass. His thoughts were far from business or meetings, they were filled with Lena. He had tried to stay away, to remind himself of the difference between their worlds. But no matter how much he tried, he couldn't ignore how much he cared about her. There was something about her simplicity, her strength, and her pure heart that drew him in. She wasn't impressed by money or looks. She respected people for their kindness. And that made her different, special. That same afternoon, Lena arrived with her mother to help clean the upper floor. The rain had soaked her shoes, and her hair was slightly damp, but she didn't complain. She smiled as she helped her mother carry a bucket upstairs. Ethan's mother, Mrs. Johnson, greeted them kindly but was clearly stressed. They were expecting important guests that evening. "Please make sure the sitting room looks perfect," she said sharply before walking away to take a phone call. Lena and her mother worked quietly, dusting and polishing the furniture. While her mother went to fetch something from the storage room, Lena stayed behind to arrange fresh flowers in a vase. She was humming softly when Ethan entered the room. "Still working hard, I see," he said with a smile. Lena turned quickly, surprised. "Oh, I didn't see you there, sir. I mean Ethan," she corrected herself nervously. He chuckled. "That's better. How are you?" "I'm fine," she said shyly, looking down at the flowers. "Just trying to make sure everything looks nice for your guests." He took a step closer. "It already looks perfect," he said softly. She looked up, and for a brief moment their eyes met. The room was quiet except for the gentle sound of rain outside. Something unspoken passed between them. A feeling they both understood, but didn't dare to say out loud. Just then, Lena's mother returned, and the moment broke. Ethan quickly stepped back, pretending to check something on the table. "You're doing a great job," he said before walking away. but Lena could feel her heart still racing. Later that evening, as the rain continued, the guests began to arrive. The mansion filled with chatter, music, and the scent of expensive perfume. Lena and her mother stayed in the background, serving drinks and clearing plates. Ethan, dressed in a black suit, moved through the crowd with the ease of someone used to being admired. But his eyes often drifted toward Lena, who was working quietly near the corner of the room. Everything seemed normal until Mrs. Johnson's close friend, Mrs. Parker, noticed Lena. "Oh, Maria," she said loudly, waving at Lena's mother. "Is that your daughter? She's quite pretty. Does she go to college?" Maria smiled proudly. "Not yet, ma'am. We're saving up so she can continue her studies soon." Mrs. Parker chuckled in a way that made Lena uncomfortable. "That's sweet. Though, in this world, it's hard for girls like her to rise too far, isn't it?" The word stung, but Lena kept her eyes down and stayed quiet. Her mother's face turned pale, but before she could reply, another voice cut through the noise, Ethan's. "With respect, Mrs. Parker," he said firmly, his tone calm but serious. "Girls like her are the ones who make this world better. Not everyone needs wealth to have value." The room fell silent. A few people exchanged surprised glances. A billionaire's son defending a maid's daughter? That wasn't something they saw every day. Mrs. Parker looked embarrassed and tried to laugh it off. "Oh, Ethan dear, I didn't mean it that way." "I'm sure you didn't," he interrupted politely but firmly. "But sometimes, words can hurt more than we realize." Lena stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Her heart was pounding, and she wanted to disappear, but deep down, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: respect. No one had ever stood up for her like that before. After the guests left, Lena and her mother stayed late to clean up. Her mother whispered, "I can't believe Mr. Ethan said that in front of everyone. He's such a good man." Lena nodded quietly, but her thoughts were racing. She couldn't understand why he kept defending her, helping her, and looking at her like she was someone important. She knew she shouldn't hope for anything more. People like him lived in a different world. Still, her heart betrayed her every time she saw him smile. When most of the mansion had gone quiet, Ethan found her again in the kitchen, helping her mother wash dishes. "You shouldn't have said that," Lena whispered when she noticed him standing near the door. "Said what?" he asked, leaning casually against the wall. "Defending me like that in front of your family's guests," she said softly. "People will talk." He shrugged. "Let them talk. I said what was right." She looked down at the soapy water. "You don't understand. People like them. They'll make fun of you because of me." He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Then they're not the kind of people I care about." Her breath caught in her throat. "Why do you care so much, Ethan?" He hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "Because you're different. You see the world in a way that most people don't. You remind me what's real." Lena's heart felt like it was about to burst. She didn't know how to respond. She wanted to tell him how much his kindness meant to her, but she was afraid of what might happen if she said too much. So instead, she whispered, "You're kind, but we're from different worlds." Ethan smiled sadly. "Maybe, but sometimes, two worlds can meet in the rain." Before she could say anything else, a flash of lightning lit up the sky, followed by a deep rumble of thunder. For a second, they both stood there, the distance between them filled with emotions they couldn't name. When Lena finally left that night, the rain had stopped, but her heart felt like it was caught in a storm, one she wasn't sure she could escape. And for Ethan, watching her disappear down the long driveway, he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't ready to let her go. The morning after the rainstorm felt different. The sun rose gently over the Johnson mansion, lighting up the wet garden and glittering drops of water that clung to the leaves. Lena woke up early as usual, helping her mother pack her cleaning supplies. But today, her mind wasn't calm. It was full of thoughts about Ethan. His words from the night before kept echoing in her heart. Maybe two worlds can meet in the rain. She tried to brush it off, reminding herself that such things were impossible. He was a billionaire's son, and she was just the maid's daughter. Life didn't work like fairy tales. Still, a part of her heart refused to stop hoping just a little. When they reached the mansion that morning, the place was already buzzing with activity. Mrs. Johnson was hosting a charity event for the local hospital, and many important people were expected to attend. Lena and her mother were put in charge of arranging flowers and helping the kitchen staff. Ethan was there too, dressed neatly in a white shirt and black trousers, looking calm and focused. He noticed Lena as soon as she entered the hall, and a soft smile appeared on his face. He wanted to talk to her, but with so many people around, it wasn't the right moment. Throughout the day, their eyes met a few times across the room. Each time it was like time slowed for a heartbeat, but neither of them spoke. They both knew how dangerous it could be if someone noticed. By late afternoon, the event began. Guests arrived in elegant cars, wearing expensive clothes and jewelry. Lena moved quietly around the tables, refilling drinks and offering trays of food. Ethan, on the other hand, stood near his father, greeting business partners and shaking hands. From the outside, he looked every bit the confident, polished young heir. But inside, his heart was somewhere else, following every step Lena took. Then something unexpected happened. While serving drinks near the main table, Lena slipped on a bit of spilled juice. The tray in her hands wobbled, and several glasses fell, shattering loudly on the marble floor. The sound cut through the music, and all eyes turned toward her. Lena froze, her face turning pale. I'm so sorry, she stammered, trying to pick up the pieces quickly. Mrs. Parker, the same woman who had insulted her before, frowned. "This is why maids shouldn't serve during important events," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. A few people chuckled quietly. Lena's hands trembled. Her mother rushed to help, whispering, "It's okay, dear. Just clean it up." But tears were already forming in Lena's eyes. Before she could say anything, Ethan stepped forward. "That's enough," he said, his voice firm but calm. The room went silent again. It was an accident, and no one was hurt. There's no reason to speak to her like that. Mrs. Parker blinked, clearly uncomfortable. "Ethan, darling, I was only saying," he interrupted gently but clearly. "Sometimes the way we say things shows more about us than what we actually mean." Everyone went quiet. Even Mr. Johnson, who had been watching silently, looked surprised. Ethan bent down to help Lena pick up the broken glass, ignoring the stunned looks from the guests. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Lena could barely speak. I'm fine," she whispered, her eyes glistening. He smiled faintly. "Then let's clean this up together." That small gesture, the billionaire's son kneeling beside the maid's daughter, said more than words ever could. Some people looked shocked, others whispered, but Ethan didn't care. He was tired of pretending that class and money mattered more than kindness. After the event ended, Lena went to the back garden to calm down. The night air was cool, and the lights from the mansion shimmered on the wet grass. She was embarrassed but also deeply touched by what Ethan had done. No one had ever defended her like that. Not once, not in front of everyone. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at her with gentle eyes. "You shouldn't have done that," she said quietly, though her voice was shaky. "Why not?" he asked softly. "People will talk. They'll think I did something to get your attention. My mother could lose her job because of me." Ethan stepped closer. "No one's losing their job," he said firmly. "I won't let that happen, and I don't care what people think." Lena shook her head. "You don't understand. You're from a world where people have choices. I don't. My life isn't like yours." Ethan sighed. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve respect. You deserve to be treated like any other person, with dignity." There was a long silence. The sound of crickets filled the air. Then he looked at her more seriously. "Lena, the night you were at that café when you had only $4 for your date, I was there." She froze, her breath catching. "You?" He nodded. "I saw you sitting there, waiting, trying to smile even though you were hurt. You didn't know it, but you inspired me that night. You reminded me that kindness still exists even in pain. Her eyes filled with tears. So it was you. The note, the cake? He smiled softly. Yes, I just wanted to make your night a little better. Lena didn't know what to say. All the emotions she had been holding back came rushing at once. Surprise, gratitude, disbelief. Why? She asked quietly. Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of honesty. Because you deserved it. And because from that night, I couldn't forget you. The words hung in the air, soft but powerful. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to fade. It was just the two of them standing there, caught between two very different worlds, connected by something real. Lena finally whispered, Ethan, our lives are too different. People like you don't end up with people like me. He took a slow breath and said gently, maybe that's true, but that doesn't mean I can't care about you. I don't want to forget you again, Lena. Her heart ached, torn between reason and emotion. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same, but she was afraid of what the future might bring. Still, when he reached out and gently took her hand, she didn't pull away. The night breeze brushed past them as they stood together under the soft glow of the garden lights. Neither of them knew what would happen next, whether their paths would stay together or drift apart. But one thing was certain. That night, the maid's daughter and the billionaire's son had both learned that kindness, respect, and love could cross even the widest of worlds. And sometimes, all it took was a single act of courage, or a note left on a café napkin, to change two lives forever.